In 1945, a man stood in a Dutch courtroom facing the death penalty for a crime most would consider unforgivable, selling a national treasure to the highest-ranking officials of the Nazi regime.
But to save his life, Han van Meegeren had to confess to a crime even more unbelievable. He wasn't a traitor. He was the greatest art forger the world had ever seen. He hadn't sold a Dutch masterpiece to the enemy. He had sold a fake that he painted in his own studio.
This is the story of a man who turned resentment into an art form, and in doing so, pulled off the most daring swindle in history.
Henricus Antonius van Meegeren was born in 1889 in the small Dutch city of Deventer. From his earliest years, he was a child defined by conflict. His father, a strict and pragmatic schoolteacher, had no time for the whims of an artist. He forbade his son from pursuing art, forcing him instead to study architecture in Delft.
But the soul of an artist cannot be suppressed by a father's decree. While studying for a career he didn't want, Han spent every waking hour sketching and painting, obsessed with the techniques of the Dutch Golden Age. He eventually dropped his architectural studies to follow his passion, and for a while it seemed his father was wrong. Van Meegeren was talented. He won prizes for his work and began to gain recognition in the Dutch art world. But as the 20th century roared forward into the era of Cubism, Surrealism, and abstraction, Han stayed behind. He worshipped the masters of the 17th century, Rembrandt, Frans Hals, and above all, Johannes Vermeer. To Han, these men represented the pinnacle of human achievement. To the art critics of the 1920s, however, Han van Meegeren was a relic. They mocked his work as unoriginal and derivative. One prominent critic wrote that he had all the technique of a master, but none of the soul.
This rejection curdled into a deep, burning resentment. Han felt that the art establishment was a clique of elitist frauds who wouldn't know a masterpiece if it hit them in the face. He decided that if they wouldn't accept his original work, he would make them crawl for it under a different name.
He didn't just want to paint like the masters. He wanted to become them. He wanted to prove that he was so technically brilliant that the greatest experts in the world couldn't tell the difference between his hand and the hand of God's own painter, Vermeer. But forging a Vermeer was considered impossible. Only about 35 of his paintings were known to exist. His style was unique, defined by a luminous use of light and a specific chemical composition of paints that had long since been lost to time. He spent years in a secret laboratory in the south of France, perfecting his method. He bought authentic 17th century canvases, scraping away the original paintings to ensure the fabric and wood would pass a carbon dating test. He hand-ground his own pigments, using expensive lapis lazuli for his blues and white lead for his highlights, just as Vermeer had done. But the biggest hurdle was the age of the paint. Real oil paint takes decades, even centuries, to fully harden and develop the characteristic cracks known as craquelure. If an expert touched a fresh painting with a cotton swab soaked in alcohol, the paint would smudge, proving it was new. Han's breakthrough was a stroke of dark genius. He mixed his pigments with a synthetic resin called bakelite, a precursor to modern plastic. After finishing a painting, he would bake it in a custom-built oven at high temperatures. The heat hardened the resin instantly, making the paint as brittle and indestructible as a 300-year-old masterpiece. He would then roll the canvas over a cylinder to create the perfect network of cracks, which he filled with black Indian ink to simulate centuries of accumulated dust. In 1937, he was ready. He produced his first masterpiece, a painting titled The Supper at Emmaus. He claimed it was a lost work from Vermeer's early period, a missing link that historians had long suspected existed. He didn't try to sell it himself. Instead, he used a series of intermediaries to bring it to the attention of Dr. Abraham Bredius, the most respected art historian and Vermeer expert in the world. Bredius fell for it completely. He called it the masterpiece of Johannes Vermeer of Delft and claimed it was the crowning achievement of his career to have discovered it. The art world erupted.
The painting was purchased by the Rembrandt Society for a staggering sum and hung in the Boijmans Museum in Rotterdam. Han van Meegeren sat back and watched as the very critics who had mocked his talent wept in front of a canvas he had finished just months earlier in a hot oven. He had won.
But the money was too good to stop. Over the next few years, as Europe descended into the darkness of World War II, Han produced a string of undiscovered Vermeers and De Hooch.
He became one of the wealthiest men in the Netherlands, living a life of decadence in Amsterdam, while the country suffered under Nazi occupation. He owned dozens of houses, marble-floored mansions, and a collection of jewelry that would make royalty blush.
Then came the man who would be his undoing, Hermann Goering. The Reichsmarschall was a glutton for many things: power, morphine, and especially art. He considered himself the ultimate connoisseur and wanted to build a collection that would rival the Louvre.
Goering was obsessed with Vermeer. When he heard that a new Vermeer, titled Christ with the Woman Taken in Adultery, had surfaced on the Dutch market, he had to have it.
Han van Meegeren saw an opportunity. Through a Nazi-aligned art dealer, he sold the painting to Goering. The price was nearly 2 million guilders, one of the highest prices ever paid for a painting at the time.
To settle the debt, Goering didn't just pay in cash. He traded 137 looted Dutch paintings, returning them to their home soil in exchange for the Vermeer. Han had essentially swindled the second most powerful man in the Third Reich, taking his money and reclaiming stolen national heritage in the process.
When the war ended in 1945, the Allied monuments men discovered Goering's art stash hidden in an Austrian salt mine. Among the treasures was Christ with the Woman Taken in Adultery.
The trail of the sale led directly back to Han van Meegeren. To the Dutch authorities, the case was clear. Han was a collaborator. He had sold a priceless piece of Dutch cultural heritage to the enemy. This was treason, a crime punishable by death.
For weeks, Han sat in a prison cell. He realized that if he remained silent, he would be executed as a traitor. If he spoke the truth, he would be laughed at as a fraud. He chose the truth. In a dramatic outburst during his interrogation, he shouted, "You fools! I didn't sell a Vermeer to Goering. I painted it myself." The authorities didn't believe him. They thought it was a desperate ploy to escape the gallows. How could one man, a mediocre artist from Deventer, have fooled the greatest experts in the world and the top brass of the Nazi Party? The skepticism was so great that the court demanded proof. What followed was one of the most surreal trials in legal history. While the world watched, the court provided Han with a studio, brushes, and paints. Under the constant supervision of police and art experts, he began his final performance.
Over the course of several weeks, he painted Jesus among the doctors. As the figures emerged on the canvas, the truth became undeniable. The brushwork, the light, the composition, it was a Vermeer. Or rather, it was a Van Meegeren.
The trial turned into a national sensation. Overnight, the man who had been the most hated collaborator in the Netherlands became a folk hero. He was the man who had cheated the Nazis. He was the man who had humiliated the arrogant art critics who looked down on the common people. The legal consequences were complicated. He was cleared of the charge of collaboration, but he was still a criminal. He was convicted of forgery and fraud. In 1947, he was sentenced to 1 year in prison. It was a light sentence, considering the scale of his deception, but Han would never serve it. The years of stress, the chemicals he used in his forgeries, and a lifetime of heavy drinking and smoking had taken their toll. He suffered a massive heart attack and died just weeks before he was due to enter prison. The legacy of Han van Meegeren is a haunting one for the art world. He didn't just paint fakes, he fundamentally broke the trust between the viewer and the canvas. After his confession, every Vermeer in every museum was suddenly under suspicion. Some paintings that had been cherished for decades were quietly removed from gallery walls, revealed to be Van Meegeren's. His work was so convincing that even today, some experts argue about whether certain minor Vermeers might actually be Han's.
He proved that art is not just about the object itself, but about the story we tell ourselves about it. The Supper at Emmaus didn't change between 1937 and 1945. The brushstrokes were the same, the light was the same, but when people thought it was a Vermeer, it was a religious experience. When they knew it was a Van Meegeren, it was a lie.
Han van Meegeren was a man of immense talent and even greater spite. He was a fraud, a genius, and a survivor who used his brush to wage a one-man war against an establishment that rejected him and a regime that occupied his country. He remains the ultimate reminder that in the world of high art, things are rarely what they seem, and the greatest masterpieces might just be hiding a secret baked in a kitchen oven.
If you enjoyed this deep dive into history's greatest art mystery, make sure to subscribe.